My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
Hey, how are you? My name is Ben, and I am a movie buff. I am one part video game nerd, one part comic book nerd, but all parts movie nerd.
Our mission is to bring nerd culture to the masses
by putting it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast. Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope. And welcome to the final Bat Jar Podcast of the decade.
Yeah, that's right, huh?
The last of the year and the last of this decade. This is also the final appearance of Ben the Movie Buff as a dedicated co-host of the show.
Yes, that's right. Sorry, guys. Just, it's busy being a dad, and I worked a lot this year, and I'm going to work more even next year, so unfortunately there's just not enough time, but I hope to come back as a guest here and there.
And of course, and it's the same story for Dr. What. Like, you guys are dedicated friends of the show. You guys are great to have here, and I'm really excited for who's coming next. We'll talk more about that later, but It's almost Christmas, and while we are talking about a movie that is not Christmas related, I thought we could find a way at the beginning of the show here to make a little bit of Christmas talk.
Yeah.
So on Instagram this week, I saw a Would You Rather Christmas edition.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it'd be fun for us to kind of play this with each other.
Absolutely.
So basically, you know how this kind of thing works, right?
Yeah.
I give you two options.
Have to pick one.
And you have to pick one.
Got it.
And I will demand an explanation if it isn't the same one that I would choose.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Would you rather garland or mistletoe?
Would I rather garland or mistletoe?
Would you rather have garland or mistletoe in your home at Christmas?
Oh, well. Geez. Well, I don't know. Do you have an answer? I'm kind of torn just because I don't think I've ever had mistletoe in my home. It's only been like garland.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, mistletoe is not a bad idea. I mean, my wife would be the only one kissing me. but that's okay. That's fine. I like kisses from her. What would you pick?
Definitely garland. I like having garland for decorating. None of the garland I own right now is in where we are.
Yeah.
There's actually garland out on the railing outside you can't see.
Vaguely, though, but yeah, okay, cool.
And there's other, just decoratively, and every time I walk into a house and I see like a banister with staircases or columns or any kind of like windowsill, I think garland can go there.
That's fair. Yeah, so no, I'll agree with you on garland. If I was like a 16-year-old teenager and I was single, which I was basically single for the most part being a teenager, I would have said mistletoe. But I'm not. I'm a adult.
Number 2.
Yep.
Stocking gifts or actual gifts?
Actual gifts.
Yeah, you're not a big stocking person?
I like stockings. I just tend to get more interesting gifts. I get more Blu-rays under the Christmas tree than I do in my stocking. I'm sorry, I'm so simple when it comes to like, oh, Ben, what do you want for Christmas? It's like anything movie related is what I want for Christmas.
Yep, I
but that's me, right? Like,
yep, I feel you.
What about you?
Actual presents for sure. I mean,
okay.
I have a nice little stocking, but this is going to sound greedy, but you can only fit so much in a stocking.
That's true. That's a fair point.
Number 3, real tree, or they use the word fake tree here, which I'm offended by, so I'm going to call it an artificial tree.
Okay. So I would pick real tree, although right now, like the last few years, my wife and I, because we don't have that much room in our apartment, we have been using a fake tree, which looks pretty decent, but yes.
Artificial.
Right, sorry, artificial tree. But yes, I would pick
I'm going to get
trees.
semantical here, because at the end of the day, the word artificial and the word fake kind of mean the same thing.
Right.
But to me, when someone uses the word fake, there's kind of this suggestion that it's disgenuine, that it's like trying to hide something.
Right.
And for me, an artificial Christmas tree can fulfill the spirit of it's like. What is a Christmas tree trying to be? The artificial tree can do that, but to say it's a fake tree implies it's like pretending to be something it's not. And I get it. In a sense, it is. It's not an actual tree.
Yeah.
But I think on a instead of following the letter of the law and saying you must have a tree from outdoors in your home, I think an artificial tree can fulfill the spirit of what a Christmas tree is meant to be.
And it does. I can attest to that. We've used our artificial tree for the last 3 Christmases, and I've been totally fine with it.
And I'm allergic to natural trees, so I'm sure if I didn't have that allergy, I'd be all over having a natural tree in my home.
Yep.
but using the same tree every year kind of brings its own set of traditions. So
that's right. And
that's
looks good.
That's my defense of that.
Oh, that's fair.
Number 4, white lights or colored lights?
Colored lights.
Okay.
And I would say, just for the reason that I feel like, even though, yes, you'll get color in Christmas decorations and color, especially on the Christmas tree and on gift wrapping and whatnot, for me, there's just something like white lights are fine and all outside, but we both live here in Ontario, right? So there's loads of snow, and we already see a lot of white snow. So I like having the color, especially houses being colorful with like red and blue and green and all that.
I actually don't have a preference. I like both.
Yep.
So listeners can't see this, but and neither can you because the tree's not turned on. But there are white lights on the tree, but then there's colored lights outside.
Yep.
So
that's a good balance.
Number 5. This one I'm not actually sure what they mean, but the options are velvet and sparkle. So what I think they're asking us about are like ribbons or bows.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like, would you rather have a bow that was all velvety or one that was all sparkly?
Interesting. Okay. I'm probably going to pick velvet just because, as nice as sparkle looks, a lot of the sparkly stuff that I have encountered in the last few years very easily gets on my hands, on my fingers, and I just can't get it off.
Ben the movie buff.
Yeah.
Can I move in with you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? Let me just ask my wife first.
Number 6, Christmas Eve versus Christmas Day.
Ooh. See, this is an interesting one because I was talking about this with my wife the other day. I was saying, I love Christmas Day. I absolutely do. But there's something about the build up to Christmas, right? When you're 4 weeks away, 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away, 1 week away, Christmas Eve. I'm still probably going to pick Christmas Day, but Christmas Eve is like so close in second. I think it's still really exciting. Like for us, we go to the evening mass and then we come back and we watch It's a Wonderful Life on TV, typically like the last half, but we do have kind of like traditions on the Christmas Eve.
Yeah. I don't even have to say anything. You basically said it all for me.
I'm just speaking your mind.
Number 7, I think this is now.
Okay.
A white Christmas or a warm Christmas?
White Christmas.
Thank you.
All the way.
Number 7 or 8, I've lost count. Gingerbread or sugar cookies?
You know what? I like both, but I'd give the edge to sugar cookies.
This is amazing. I'm in total agreement with this.
That's so funny.
Next up, we have spiced cider or eggnog.
Once again, both are pretty good. I think I'm gonna have to go with eggnog.
Okay, great. So would I.
Wow, we're like 4 for 4 or 5 for 5.
Yeah, something like I'm.
That's hilarious.
I particularly like eggnog and coffee.
Interesting. I'm not a huge coffee fan, but I do like eggnog.
I find generally like at least the store-bought eggnog is so rich that like even if I have a glass of eggnog, it's like half milk, half eggnog.
Yeah.
Because it's so strong.
And I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but I had eggnog, or typically when I have eggnog, I'll drink it, and then afterwards I get a weird aftertaste of bubble gum. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I feel like some people, like if anyone, I hope I'm not alone in this because, sometimes I'll take a little sip. I'm like, that's good. And I'm like, bubblegum? That's weird. There's no bubblegum ingredients here, but go figure.
Christmas, this is going to be an easy one, I think, but Christmas music or Christmas movies?
Christmas movies. But once again, I do like Christmas music. I especially like a lot of the hymns, like Hark the Herald Angels Sing, Joy to the World, Silent Night, O Holy Night. But yeah, you know me. Like, it's in my title, guys. Like, it has to be movies.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. I like Christmas music, especially songs like Go Tell It on the Mountain. Mm-hmm. And even like the more secular Christmas songs, like, even to hear Faith Hill do her Where Are You Christmas? I'm like, ah.
That's right.
Because I get more nostalgia for how it was in the one Grinch movie.
Yep, right.
But then it comes back to the Christmas movies. And,
yep.
We've had many a conversation on the show about the different types of Christmas movies, so we all know how I feel about those.
Yep.
And finally, we have probably the most judgmental option on here. Give or receive?
Well, it's nice to receive, but I feel like as I've gotten older, I feel like, it is important to give, because when I think about the amount of times that people have been very generous to me around Christmas, heck, any time of the year really, but especially around Christmas with gifts or this or that, anything really. I think it just kind of reminds you to pass it on and continue to give to people. So while it might not always feel as good as receiving, because it's nice to receive gifts, I think it is better to give.
Yeah, definitely as a child, I would have said receiving.
Yeah.
But as I got older and started to learn more about Santa Claus and what that actually means for me in my life, I started to appreciate the giving more.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And just the way my love languages work, acts of service is like one of the top ones for me in terms of how I receive.
Yeah.
And so for me, like the act of like going out and trying to find the right, like not just a sentimental gift, but like something that's meaningful and might actually like add value to your life in some way. The act of the work involved like trying to find that gift is like a way I love to give.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. I agree.
Well, it sounds like if the opportunity ever presents itself, we should celebrate Christmas together.
Yeah, absolutely. Did we disagree on any? I'm not
I think you favored the real tree.
Oh, right. So I get like 1.
And you actually had a preference about the lights where I was kind of like, I'll do whatever.
Okay. So it was like 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Well, that's impressive.
So there you go. We'll just talk to your wife and your son and we'll, next Christmas.
Absolutely. All I got to do is get Dexter to smile. And then, I think I got a yes from him.
So there you go. We'll give some holiday greetings at the end of the show, but time to pivot because we are indeed talking. Last week we suffered through the Star Wars holiday special.
Today.
And I'm happy to say that what we're talking about today is much better than the Star Wars holiday special.
Oh, yeah.
We are indeed, we literally just got back from seeing Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and that's going to be what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned a couple times on the show kind of just news related to this movie and whatnot, but we got to go back to 2012.
Yes.
Very soon after Disney acquired Lucasfilm, it was announced that there was going to be a new Star Wars trilogy, and that was going to not only take place after the original trilogy, and that the original trio from the first 3 films were going to be coming back. This is also when they decided to throw out all the expanded universe and make it Legends.
Yeah.
And this is also when they announced who was going to be directing all these different films. So they announced that J.J. Abrams would direct Episode 7, Rian Johnson would do Episode 8, and Colin Trevorrow was announced as the director for Episode 9. And at that point, I didn't actually know who Colin Trevorrow was. And the same year that The Force Awakens came out, he directed The Jurassic World.
Yes.
Which I have not seen yet.
Okay.
But shortly thereafter, by 2017, Colin Trevorrow, for whatever reason, it says he left the project due to creative differences with Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah.
But I heard that he released a movie. It was some indie movie that got really terrible reviews, and that was what made them fire him.
Yeah, I think the one you're talking about, if we're talking about the one after Jurassic World, he did one called The Book of Henry.
That's it, The Book of Henry.
That's what it was called, yeah.
Did you ever see it?
I didn't. I'll probably watch it one day, but yeah, from him, I've just seen Jurassic World.
So, who knows? Maybe, there has been a lot of creator-director conflicts in this Disney Lucasfilm era, so it wouldn't surprise me if he actually left the show due to creative differences. But it also wouldn't surprise me if Kathleen Kennedy, who is the president of Lucasfilm, she's like the Kevin Feige for Star Wars. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if she just saw that Book of Henry movie and was like, all right, get this guy out of here.
That's right. Yeah, I don't think we can do this anymore.
So this final film, this is marketed as the end of the Skywalker saga. These 9 episodes that have been part of this whole saga, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And we've known for 7 years that the movie was going to happen. And when Episode 7 came out in 2015, hard to believe that was 4 years ago.
It is crazy. Wow.
When Episode 7 came out, a lot of people liked it because it was very reminiscent of the original trilogy. And then a lot of people didn't like it because it was so much like the original Episode 4 movie. Yeah. Where did you fall on the spectrum there?
Oh, easy. For me, and I have heard every single criticism for Force Awakens, and I have a few of my own, But I love that movie. I don't care how many flaws you can pick at it or this or that, or it's all like New Hope and whatnot. I could care less because the experience of going to see that movie and just how entertaining it was, how much I love the new characters, hearing John Williams' like new Star Wars music, seeing some of the old Star Wars characters kind of come back and wonder what was going to happen next. I love it. And I think if there is any good Star Wars movie of the recent films, I would argue it's Force Awakens.
Okay. And then 2 years later, in 2017, we got Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. And that movie caused a whole lot of stuff to happen.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Because I'm convinced there's no way to make a Star Wars movie that makes everybody happy.
That's right, there isn't.
Because with Episode 7, you had people who were upset that it was too much like the original movies.
Yeah.
And so then Episode 8 comes along and really kind of shakes things up and does something really different.
Yeah.
And that upset a lot of Star Wars fans.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, you've gone too far away. Like that's like the way certain characters are portrayed.
Yeah.
Was so negative that they said, no, okay, you're too far away from what the original trilogy was.
Yeah.
And so just looking at the audience and like even just looking at Rotten Tomatoes, for example, Episode 7, everyone seemed to agree on generally 93% from critics, 86% from audiences. Mm-hmm. But then you go to Last Jedi from a few years ago.
Yeah.
91% from critics. So generally critics really liked it, not quite as much as Force Awakens.
Yep.
Currently it has 43% from audiences.
Wow, that is so low. I mean, I'm not that surprised, but it's still like, well, what a difference between critics and audiences. Wow.
And how did you feel about The Last Jedi?
For The Last Jedi, so just to preface this, when I saw the prequels as a kid and also as a teenager, I think I kind of sensed that they were not as good as the original trilogy, which of course everyone will be like, duh. But for me, I love Star Wars so much that just seeing a Star Wars movie for me is such an exciting experience, whether it is a great Star Wars movie or a bad Star Wars movie. And we've had quite the different range of variety when it comes to like the good, the bad Star Wars films and all that. Last Jedi for me is a pretty good film. There are a lot of things I like about it and a few things that I don't like about it. And is one of the rare Star Wars movies where in the last 10 minutes, I was tempted to check my watch because I felt like it was going on a bit too long. The movie was kind of exhausting with like the constant chase. And by the time we were getting to like one of the most intense scenes towards the end, I was just like, is this done yet? Come on, guys, let's wrap it up here. But I still like it. I'm not on that spectrum of like, I absolutely hate it, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's a cinematic failure. It has some flaws, but it also has some things that I really like about it.
So it sounds like you enjoy 7 more than 8.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like 7 is, one of my favorite Star Wars movies, easily.
Because when Force Awakens came out, it grossed over $2 billion.
Oh, yeah.
It is to this day, 4 years later, the highest grossing film of all time domestically.
Yes.
And it's one of the highest grossing films of all time. I think the only movies that have made more money than it, like worldwide, globally, are Endgame, Avatar, and maybe that's it, just those two.
Yeah, Infinity War made around $2 billion as well, but I can't remember whether it's right above Force Awakens or right below Force Awakens. But yeah, it's only a few movies that are higher than Force Awakens.
But then Last Jedi it still made a lot of money. I think it still made like $1.5 billion.
Yeah, something
which
like
is
that.
nothing to sneeze at. That still makes it one of the highest grossing movies ever.
Yeah.
But when you consider that it's a follow-up to a movie that everyone seemingly loved, it's a disappointment.
A bit of, yeah.
And you could argue that maybe that there were just a lot of people excited for Episode 7 and all the people who were like, oh, this is so much of the same, they didn't come back for 8. So they when we reviewed the Last Jedi in this podcast, I felt very conflicted because there were things I liked about it and there were things I didn't like about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I didn't like about Force Awakens is they kind of introduced a lot of mysteries and they'd leave them kind of just hanging, like dangling keys in front of you, being like, hey, like, this will be important later.
Yeah.
And then the way that Last Jedi presents itself, every single one of those mysteries is kind of like thrown away. It's like, oh, you were sitting there waiting for 2 years for us to answer this question? Doesn't matter.
That's right.
Let's move along.
That's right, yeah.
And I felt kind of manipulated, honestly, because like they intentionally introduced those mysteries in 7 so that I would basically keep thinking about Star Wars in the interim. And then I show up for 8 being like, oh, okay, like what does this mean and what does that mean and who are Rey's parents? And then Episode 8, Last Jedi, proceeds to say, none of that matters. Let's move on.
It was... And I mean, yeah, like we could go on for hours here, but yes, I agree. There were a lot of things that I was excited about for Last Jedi that I'm like, how are they going to build upon this from Force Awakens? And it's like either they did, but it was just very quickly to see like, hey, see, we did it. We referenced it. Now let's move on. Or it was, no, we're just not going to bring it up at all. And yeah, I think it is a little kind of disappointing because there are expectations in there, right? Force Awakens sets them up, and Last Jedi should either remind us or have the resolution, but it didn't kind of really what's the word? It didn't kind of assume the responsibility. It's like, we're doing our own thing. Yeah, hope you're cool with it. And clearly, a lot of people weren't.
Yeah, it didn't feel like the middle part of a trilogy. It felt like.
Yeah.
As if Rian Johnson, as the writer and director, was like, all right, now let's go over here.
Exactly.
Into this direction. Yeah. And why are we talking about these other movies before talking about Rise of Skywalker? We're kind of like painting the picture for you as to like what this production was coming into. Mm-hmm. Because The Last Jedi was so divisive among Star Wars fans, I think Kelly Marie Tran, who was in The Last Jedi as Rose, had to like leave social media because she was being assaulted by people, not physically, of course, but
it's like cyberbullying basically, and even worse, you could argue, but which is just like absolutely disgusting.
So, and then on top of that, the original story they created for this new trilogy intended for 7 to be the movie that focused on Han, 8 to be the movie that focused on Luke, and then 9 for be the movie that focused on Leia. But of course, in 2016, was it?
Yes, late December.
That Carrie Fisher passed away.
Yeah.
So we have to, when we're talking about the Rise of Skywalker, we have to bear in mind that what they originally intended to do, not just with the story, but also with the director and everything else, they've had to pivot a lot.
Yep.
And as we talk about the movie, I could see moments in the movie that were basically trying to be course corrections from things that people wouldn't have liked from The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So if you didn't like The Last Jedi, chances are you will like The Rise of Skywalker.
Hopefully.
But by contrast, if you did like The Last Jedi, you probably will be disappointed by The Rise of Skywalker. And I also think this is interesting, Ben the Movie Buff, that this movie is coming out post-Avengers Endgame.
Yes.
Because Avengers Endgame was basically doing the same thing in terms of trying to bring to a close a story that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Include a lot of fan service and references to previous movies and whatnot. And without spoiling anything, The Rise of Skywalker, which is meant to be the conclusion of this 9-film saga that's been spanning now for 42 years, it's kind of doing the same thing. And I think if we hadn't experienced Avengers Endgame earlier this year, I think I might have been a little more impressed by The Rise of Skywalker.
I remember reading someone saying on social media earlier this year that 2019 is a huge year because it's the last season of Game of Thrones. Like that's done. Like that's a big franchise giant. And then you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which of course will continue to go on, but the Infinity Stone saga ending this year, and then you have the Skywalker saga ending as well. But I did find myself here and there while watching this movie thinking about specifically kind of like how Avengers Endgame wrapped up their 22-film extravaganza, their cinematic universe.
Now, when I was a kid, I was fortunate that basically by the time I was 8 years old, there was a new Star Wars movie to go see.
Yep.
So for people who grew up on the original trilogy, they had to wait, what was it, like 17 years or something like that?
Yeah, 16, I think. But yeah, a long time.
A long time for a new Star Wars movie to come out.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that basically we got a new Star Wars film every 3 years.
That's right.
During the era of the prequels.
Yeah.
And then in 2005, when The Revenge of the Sith came out, it seemed like that was it. That was the end of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, 2012 rolls around, we get this announcement of the new trilogy, and that 10-year gap between Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens is the longest amount of time in my life that I've had to wait for a new Star Wars movie.
Yep, same here.
And now, if you think about it, in the last 4 years, we've gotten 5 Star Wars movies.
Yes.
Before we actually talk about The Rise of Skywalker, which I think this is an important question, because I can see what Disney and Lucasfilm have been trying to do. They've been trying to essentially turn Star Wars into a brand on the same level as like Pixar or Marvel.
Yeah.
And they've tried to like build essentially like a cinematic universe and make it more of a franchise a meta franchise than just one film series.
Right. Yeah.
By doing spin-off movies and things like The Mandalorian.
Yep.
And doing more shows on TV and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think we have had too many Star Wars movies? Are we spoiled?
So you know what? Yeah, we kind of are spoiled. And it's funny because back in the time of the prequels, when you'd go to see the new Star Wars movie on opening day, and then you'd get to those end credits and you're like, oh, a new Star Wars movie. And whether you liked it or not, there was still so much to talk about and think about and wonder what was going to happen in the future. But you did have to wait 3 years. And, that's a pretty long time to wait for the next series, the next installment in a movie series. So the fact that since December 2015, we've had a Star Wars movie like, Christmas 2015, Christmas 2016, Christmas 2017, summer 2018, and then we had to wait a year and a half until Rise of Skywalker, and then we've gotten the Mandalorian series and whatnot. Yeah, I think we've been a little spoiled because we've basically had Star Wars to look forward to every year. And I mean, a year is still a long time, but it's not as long as 3 years.
It's true, and I almost wonder if there's too much Star Wars, like as if like we're not appreciating it enough, or we're not as interested in it because there is so much of it, like because there's not as much, things have to kind of go away for a while before our interest kind of is piqued by it again.
Yeah, I think here's a theory that I have, whether people are aware of this or not. I think, and someone did a video about this where they said, when the first 3 Star Wars movies came out, like that was the beginning of Star Wars, right? No one knew Star Wars was gonna be as big as it was until it came out in 1977, right? Then after that, you had next 3 years Empire Strikes Back, next 3 years Return of the Jedi. But then you had this whole 16-year period where there was no Star Wars going on, right?
I mean, there were books and
that's true. There was expanded universe and all that, which I imagine people were getting were definitely excited about and whatnot. But I feel like by the time the prequels rolled around, and especially by the time these new films have rolled around, you've had a lot of Star Wars fans that have been Star Wars fans for many, many years, possibly their whole life. Like me, for as far back as I can remember, I've always loved Star Wars. So I feel like, like when Force Awakens came out, yes, lots of people really liked it, but a lot of people didn't like it. And it kind of gets me wondering whether people with this kind of new, with this attitude about, knowing Star Wars and feeling like they know what's best for Star Wars and whatnot, they'll have an opinion about every single Star Wars movie. So for people that didn't like Force Awakens, I knew a fair amount of people that didn't like Force Awakens. Rogue One comes out, and they're like, Rogue One is the best Star Wars movie ever. And I'm like, I liked Rogue One, but I don't think it was worthy of that praise. But I think it's because Rogue One was very different from what Force Awakens was trying to do, right? But then you have Last Jedi, which, as you said, tried to be very different from what Force Awakens was doing. But then a lot of people weren't crazy about that. And I can't help but wonder if people hold on to their feelings, especially their negative feelings about the previous Star Wars movie, and kind of bring it to the next Star Wars movie. Because Solo, and I mean, once again, this is a debate we could have on another day, but while I don't think it's a good movie, I also don't think it's the bad movie that people have made it out to be, but I think that's because people still had a sour taste in their mouths from Last Jedi. And I feel like a lot of people going to see Rise of Skywalker, as excited as they might be, they might also have this feeling of like, well, I didn't like The Last Jedi, so I'm probably not going to like this. And I feel like each movie you have to judge separately, to a certain extent, because they're all part of a series. But I feel like, I think the people being spoiled with Star Wars could kind of lead to this negativity that kind of really hangs on from one movie to the next.
And I think even related to that, a problem I've experienced with Batman and Superman is that they're characters who are so popular and they're so well known that everyone has an opinion.
Yeah.
And everyone has an idea of who Batman is or who Superman is.
Yep.
So every time a new version of Batman or Superman shows up, whether it's on TV or in a comic or in a movie, everyone has an opinion on whether they like this version or not.
Yeah.
Because they kind of compare it to whatever they think the character is like. And I'm guilty of this too. Basically, every time I see a new version of these characters, I'm like, how does this measure up of the image of the character I have in my head?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think Star Wars is so big and so many people like it that it's the same thing. Everyone has an idea in their head as to what Star Wars is.
Yep.
And so therefore, every movie that comes out, whether it's the prequels or these new Disney movies or the original trilogy or the special editions or whatever, if these movies don't match your impression and your experience and your nostalgia for Star Wars, you're not going to be able to accept it the same.
Exactly, yeah. And I'd like to think that for me, I would describe myself as a Star Wars fan that I can recognize when they take missteps and when there are, you know, kind of flaws and all that. But I just love the universe of Star Wars so much that I'm willing to look past that to see, is there anything here that I like? Even if there isn't that much, even like the prequels, for example, are riddled with problems, but there's still a lot of things that I do like about them. And I feel like I'm an optimist, right? Every film I go see, even this one, which like I was hearing all sorts of discussion about how people were feeling about it, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to let that affect me. I'm not going to even watch any reviews about how people feel about this movie. I'm going to see this movie myself and make up my own mind.
Yeah, so as we said, we literally just got back from the theater seeing The Rise of Skywalker, so this commentary, this conversation will be a little more free-flowing than what you might usually be used to.
Yeah.
At the time of our recording, we don't have any information on how the movie's doing financially, so this episode will go out when the weekend has passed and the numbers will be available for how the movie did at the box office, but we don't got any of that yet. We do have what they're saying on Rotten Tomatoes, so just again to compare, critics for The Force Awakens, 93%.
Yep.
Critics for The Last Jedi, 91%.
Yep.
Critics for The Rise of Skywalker, 57%.
Yeah.
Based on your experience of the movie, does that make sense?
Kind of. I think it's kind of, there's so much to unpack here. But yes, I could see a lot of problems that people would have with the movie. And they're kind of problems that I had with it too, but I still managed to see a lot in the movie that I liked.
Okay, now going over to the audience scores. Force Awakens, 86%.
Yep.
Last Jedi, 43%.
Yep.
And based on all of 42 verified reviews.
Because it's still early, right?
It's still early.
It could change, could go up or down.
It could go up or down, but the audience score right now is sitting at 88%.
Wow, okay.
So kind of the opposite of The Last Jedi.
Yeah, but still very, very new. Who knows how it's going to change over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and if we go off of these percentages as they sit right now, it's almost to say that The Rise of Skywalker is a lot of fan service, that it's able, that the fans fans will enjoy it and like it.
Yep.
But the critics who maybe are looking for something new and something different are like, this is just more of the same.
Yeah.
And because we've had so many, I assume there's some movie critics like, oh, another one of these. All right.
Yeah, another Star Wars movie.
Because here's what the critic consensus says on here.
Yeah.
The Rise of Skywalker suffers from a frustrating lack of imagination, but concludes this beloved saga with fan-focused devotion. So that let's use that as our launching pad into the conversation. So we've heard what the critics have to say. We know what a small percentage of the audience have to say about it. And now you're going to hear from us. So Ben, the movie buff, I intentionally avoided watching more than the first trailer. These Star Wars movies have actually been pretty good about hiding plot elements with the trailers. So for the audience who will want to appreciate this movie without any spoilers, give us the DVD Blu-ray cover plot description of the movie.
All we've done all this time.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
Taking one last look, sir, at my friends.
Confronting fear. It's the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny.
We're all in this. Till the end. Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. Tickets available now.
Wow. After the events of The Last Jedi, we learn that Palpatine in some form has returned. And the trailers do bring this up because, it is kind of part of what will probably get you interested. Palpatine has returned. We're not exactly sure how, but of course people are trying to find out more information about that, while the Resistance, which was basically more or less defeated at the end of The Last Jedi, are still quite small and are still trying to fight against the First Order, which of course, as usual, is just becoming more and more powerful. So it's the conclusion of that of that war, and then you also have other characters kind of coming to their conclusion that has been set up in earlier movies to see how they end in the Rise of Skywalker. I'm sorry, that was really sloppy.
Well, it's okay. This is all raw, emotional energy we got going on here. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed The Rise of Skywalker.
Me too.
And I'm sure the more I sit with it, the more problems I'm going to discover with it.
Yeah.
Because there are like I'm already imagining the CinemaSins everything wrong with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there are a lot of story elements where you just have to say, like, I just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it was just the Star Wars music was kind of like turning my brain off for me. It's like, don't pay attention to that. It's Star Wars.
That's right.
Because and we can't get into any of those specifics without going to spoilers, which we will eventually.
Yep.
But just to say, there is a lot of, like, I've heard some people refer to the movie as being convoluted, and I can see what they're saying. Yeah. There's a lot of things you have to really like kind of like suspend your disbelief to be like, oh, okay, I guess that's part of the story now. Cool.
Yeah, I think for me, what helps is that despite the flaws with Force Awakens and more so Last Jedi, what Force Awakens did really good, and what Last Jedi for the most part did pretty good too, was that like they still had a lot of characters. Like for me, Finn, Poe, Rey, and Kylo Ren are all characters that I still found really interesting in the first movie, and for the most part were still pretty cool in the second movie. So I was still very invested in wanting to see what was going to happen with these characters. I also liked the fact that, without giving a certain part away, that it in some ways feels a little bit like because like really with The Last Jedi, it's characterized by like this constant chase, right? Like the First Order is always after you, and in a way, Force Awakens kind of has that going on too. So I like with Rise of Skywalker that they do kind of tone down the gigantic chase that's happening in Last Jedi. So it's still kind of there because, of course, the First Order is still fighting against the Resistance, but it's not as crazy as in The Last Jedi. There's still kind of a fun sense of adventure with kind of what they're looking for, what they have to accomplish. So I like that part about it.
Yeah, I think if you enjoyed The Force Awakens, you will enjoy The Rise of Skywalker because... And well, not entirely because, but part of it is that J.J. Abrams, who wrote and directed the first or the seventh movie, has come back to be a pinch hitter basically, and co-write and direct this one. So, in the same sense that 7 reminded me a lot of The New Hope. Yep. With whether it was intentional or not, I did get Return of the Jedi vibes.
Interesting.
From The Rise of Skywalker. So it certainly does pay homage. It doesn't feel as blatant a copy. Yeah. Like it's the same in that it's the final chapter and they have to somehow try and defeat the evil monolithic force they're going up against. Yeah. And so if people are worried that it's like a cut for cut remake of Return of the Jedi in the same way that Force Awakens was, it's not like that. But there's just similar feelings you get. And of course, I guess that's to be expected for something that's meant to be a finale.
That's right. And there's also something too that's kind of like, well, I mean, because remember in The Last Jedi how you have Kylo Ren and Rey, and of course Kylo Ren kind of does the Darth Vader thing and says we can rule the galaxy together, but that doesn't end up working out. So of course you're like, well, how's that going to end? Is it going to be like Return of the Jedi, or is it going to be kind of different? Because we've kind of seen similar things like that before. So yeah, it can't help but feel reminiscent of Return of the Jedi.
This one actually felt pretty long for me. Like I looked at my phone afterwards. It seemed like it was a good 2.5 hours.
Yeah, the movie's 2 hours and 21 minutes, but of course with the amount of ads and trailers we had to sit through towards the beginning, I think that also added length. Like the movie probably, even though the showtime was 6 o'clock, probably didn't start until like 6:20 or 6:25, I would guess. Like we had so many ads to watch through.
Yeah, that's the Christmas season.
That's right.
But yeah, it definitely felt longer to me than some of the other ones, and I don't know if that's just because they were because there was a lot that happened in the movie.
There is, yeah.
Like where the characters start and where they end are very different places. Yep. And there's just it's a very fast pace. Like you're going from one place to another. It's like, okay, we're here now, we're here now, we're here now.
Yeah,
we're
that's
here.
right. Yeah.
And like cutting back and forth between what the different characters are doing. So there's certainly a lot going on. I think one of the things I liked about The Last Jedi was like the cinematography and the visual effects and the music. Yep. And I think all those good qualities kind of continue on into this. Like I mean, there's something about the charm of the original movies with all the models and stuff that we've lost now in the era of CGI. Yeah. And I don't know, nothing looked blatantly fake. Like none of the CGI looked terrible. But did you feel like, maybe this is just my being nitpicky, and maybe because I was wearing 3D glasses, but I felt like a lot of the movie happened in like fog and dark, and like I felt like I had a hard time seeing what was going on.
See, it's funny you mentioned that because there's this kind of from what I've learned when it comes to like action cinema, especially, that unless the point of a scene is to be like hard to see because maybe there's a bit of mystery and like, oh, we don't want to give away what a certain character looks like or whatnot, that you kind of keep it hard to see. But when you have big action scenes and whatnot, you want to try and have, I guess, kind of like organized chaos, right? Where it's like you can clearly see what's happening, but you know it's still kind of crazy. And that is funny because that's something that I felt in Force Awakens they did pretty well, was all these spaceship scenes and lightsaber battles and whatnot. I felt like you could, you know, basically the whole time understand what was going on, where one ship was going and the conflict they were dealing with. But yeah, for this film, it is interesting. It felt like it fell off the wagon just a little bit. Sometimes you'd have like these lightsaber battles, but they were going so quickly that it's like, wait, what, who, like you're trying to figure out what's going on. And that's a funny thing, right? When you look at a 3D screen without the 3D glasses, the screen looks a bit lighter. The moment you put on those 3D glasses, it because of the way they're built, I guess, it feels like the screen's been dimmed down a little bit. And I feel like that can be hard sometimes and I have felt confused watching other big blockbuster action movies in 3D, is like trying to figure out what's going on. And that's not always what a director is trying to do with their action scenes. You should be able to have a sense of what's happening.
Yeah, and I think because the movie moves at such a fast pace, there are kind of moments and things that happen where you're like, oh, okay, that's, and then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's not a thing anymore. All right, let's just...
yeah, it's funny. It does kind of fall into that trap of something happens and you're like, oh, a big dramatic moment where this thing definitely happened. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But then 15, 20 minutes later, oh, no, it's okay. It's fine. And I feel like it did do that a few many times for me.
And this is me just turning into a conspiracy theorist. It's almost as if parts of what happened in this movie were meant to happen in the last movie. And
who knows?
And therefore, because Rian Johnson went on his own path with The Last Jedi, they had to try and kind of fit more of the extra story into this one.
And I can't help but wonder if that's one of the reasons why I think the story doesn't feel as tight as it could have, or more cohesive as it could have felt, because there are certain things, and I won't say what because we're not in spoiler territory yet, but certain things that are established, or certain characters like in The Last Jedi that, you know, seem to have like a fair amount of screen time and depth and meaning and whatnot, or at least attempted to. And then Rise of Skywalker comes along and it's like, yeah, sorry, we're going back to try and do the original plan. So it is funny. It did feel a little wonky here and there because you can tell that it is kind of a sequel to Star Wars: The Last Jedi, but in a way, it almost feels like it is trying to get away from the route that Rian Johnson was trying to go.
Yeah, there definitely are moments that feel like course corrections.
Yeah,
which, as again, I'm sure will appeal to the fans of 7 and will not appeal to the fans of 8. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Because this is a movie that hides so much of its plot and details in the marketing, we can't really say that much without going into spoilers.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I can think of that wouldn't be a spoiler is to say I really like what they did with Kylo Ren in the movie.
Yeah, I was wondering how that was going to go down, and yeah, I thought it was pretty decent. So I thought it was different. It was different enough. So and yeah, once again, like I think Adam Driver is such a great actor that like he has, like every movie I see him that he's in, I feel like he does such a good job. So I really do like the performances a lot in this movie. And for me, I don't know, as flawed as it might be, it still has that spirit of Star Wars adventure. And yeah, like I said, you know, there's a fair amount of fan service, but that's okay because like there are lots of good movies I can think of that have fan service. I don't mind kind of being served as a fan.
So there you go. We're going to go into the spoiler verse now, where it's okay to spoil everything.
Yeah.
And there'll be time codes in the description of the episode where you can skip around if you don't want to get the spoilers for the Rise of Skywalker. Here we go into the spoiler verse.
My name is Palpatine and Rey are my granddaughter.
Which unfortunately I had spoiled for me.
Oh, really?
But to be fair, I went on IMDb and I was just kind of like, I just wanted to see what the score of Rise of Skywalker was. And I went down to like where like you can see all reviews and it'll show you like a headline of a review. And literally it had some person that I will pray for that he doesn't spoil any other movie who's like, Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter. And I was like, thank you for that. But to be fair, I shouldn't have been on there. That was my mistake.
When as the movie was going on, I thought they were trying to suggest that she was a clone of Palpatine. I didn't even because I never really knew that Palpatine had kids.
That's right. Yeah, he would have had to if he. Yeah, but I guess he had kids before he got really dark. Yeah, that's right. I don't even know how the heck that would work.
Well, it just I guess it must have been he must have been had a child while he was a senator on Naboo.
I guess so,
because all his life. Or I guess he could have sired a child when he was ugly emperor man, but what woman would want to sleep with the frog man? I don't know. With my red eyes and my jagged teeth.
I may not look pretty, but give me a chance. Just you ever heard Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah. So I certainly got the, and again, so this is an example of the course correction. So
yeah.
In episode 7, they really build up all this mystery around Rey because she seems to be so force sensitive and we don't know why. Yeah. And there's who are her parents? And there's all this mystery. And then in The Last Jedi, it seemingly is revealed that, her parents are just nobodies that left her behind.
Yeah.
And a lot of people liked the fact that, Star Wars is so much about destiny. And it's you're predestined for a certain role based on who you are and what family you're a part of. So then Rey comes along and basically is a character who it doesn't matter where she's from or who her family is.
Yeah.
Until Rise of Skywalker comes out and says, actually it does matter what family you're a part of, and this is the destiny you're chosen for. But of course she rejects the destiny that's put before her. So So yeah, there's certainly that. At one point you see Luke's Force Ghost and she's like, I'm just doing what you did, and he's like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah,
I shouldn't.
Right. I was wrong. That's right.
And basically, it's Mark Hamill's basically saying to the audience, "Okay, all of you who didn't like how my character was used in the last movie, I'm basically admitting I was wrong, or that we were wrong."
Oh my goodness. I found it kind of funny how, so in Force Awakens, you have Snoke kind of being the Emperor Palpatine, right? And then after Force Awakens, you're like, I wonder what's the deal with that Snoke guy, right? I'm sure there are all sorts of theories about Snoke's origin and whatnot. Then in Last Jedi, he gets killed by Kylo Ren, so it's okay, so I guess he's out of the picture. And I like how literally at the beginning of Episode 9, it's I used Snoke, I created Snoke, and you see Snoke's in a lab looking thing.
Yeah.
And it's A for effort, but that's that's their explanation is you're wondering about Snoke. Yeah, he was like Palpatine because Palpatine created him. That's it. It's okay.
I mean, it was cool to see Ian McDiarmid again.
No, for sure, absolutely
in the movie.
Yeah.
But I can, in terms of a creative way, it's let's just bring back the Emperor, and he was the bad guy the whole time.
Yeah, it's again,
I still have questions about how in a 40-year period the New Republic was able to somehow fall to the influence of this First Order anyway to basically recreate the conflict of the original trilogy.
I have a million questions about how a lot of things work in Rise of Skywalker, to be honest. But yes, a lot of them have to do with Palpatine's involvement.
And then they reveal that they have this giant Sith fleet of all these ships. It's where did they build these things? How did no one and and then it's we'll talk about Leia. So Leia's character was supposed to have a big role in 9.
Yep.
Obviously she passed away, so I was trying to look for scenes she was in where it was a body double and a CG face.
Yeah.
But it looked to me as though all the scenes where Carrie Fisher's actually there was footage they shot for The Last Jedi.
And I think some of it's from Force Awakens as well. I'm pretty sure because I think so it's funny, the princess, the General Leia character, her involvement in the story is okay. I mean, I'm not going to judge that harshly. It's kind of like with Paul Walker and Furious 7, that it was you know what, you could kind of see when he was there and when he wasn't. But I'm not going to judge too harshly because making a movie is already hard enough. But when someone passes away and you have to find a way to still integrate them into the story, hats off to you to find an okay way that makes that work. But from what I could tell, I think what it was is, I think basically, they would have taken, they always would have had Carrie Fisher's face, even if they did put it on maybe a stand-in or a body double or whatnot. But then there are occasional shots where you see the back of Leia. So that's probably a someone standing in for her. And then also is one shot of or one or two shots of seeing her hands. That's probably also someone being a hand double. So there's a few little tricks there, but most of them are taking an existing Carrie Fisher performance and putting it into Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, and with whatever they had, they were still able to try and make Leia's role important in the Rise of Skywalker. I had a hard time with it just because it's it's so predicated on this relationship between Rey and Leia.
Yeah.
And I guess between the last movie and this one, she's been training Rey in how to be a Jedi.
I guess so, yeah.
But really, between the first two, like I don't think they're even in one scene together in The Last Jedi. If they are, I don't remember it.
Who, Rey and Leia?
Yeah, Rey and Leia.
That's a good question. That's right. I don't.
And then
think
they're maybe in like 1 or 2 scenes together in The Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, yeah.
So I was, and this is maybe probably being a nitpicker, but I was like, you're trying to sell me on this relationship between these two people, and I haven't seen enough to buy it.
Yeah, and you know what? You got to wonder if Carrie Fisher was still around, would they have shown her training Rey a bit more? Because that's another thing I noticed too that's kind of obvious, is that any scene that Leia is in, the other character is always doing more talking, because chances are the lines that they were able to use are little lines like believe in yourself and we should be more like little things like that, because they don't have all the Rey, you've worked hard, you've trained, you can do this, we need to get Kylo Ren back. Like I feel like they didn't have the lines, the bigger lines that they needed, the more impactful ones, so they had Rey being like, I can't do this, blah 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 blah, and then Leia would say something along the lines of believe in yourself, like because they probably didn't have that much to choose from.
Yeah,
so it's tough.
We mentioned the fan service with this movie, so you get a good scene with Force Ghost Luke. You get a scene with Han Solo. It kind of reminded me of in Justice League, or no, Batman versus Superman, when Jonathan Kent's ghost.
Yeah, that's right.
Talks to
that's
Clark.
a good connection. Yeah,
it's like for Kylo Ren to have another opportunity to see Harrison Ford.
Lando comes back.
I thought he was gonna have a bigger role in the movie. It seems like he was. It seemed like he was kind of like I can remember 3 scenes he was in.
Yeah, it was kind of small. It's like, hey, I'm here, and you know what? When you're concerned about how to fight the Emperor, just know that we had each other. And then he's in the Millennium Falcon. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, it was, and I think the biggest piece of fan service for me is like there's a moment where you hear all these voices of past Jedi.
Yes, that was kind of cool.
And not only were there ones that I recognized in the movies, but we watched the credits. Mm-hmm. They include what's her name? Ashley Eckstein, who is Ahsoka Tano, who from the Clone Wars.
Yep.
They got Freddie Prinze Jr., who is the voice of Kanan from Star Wars Rebels.
Yep.
And I saw a couple other names that are from like video games and others. So like they really dove deep in, like, Hayden Christensen, Samuel Jackson,
Ewan McGregor.
So they really went deep into like the lore. Liam Neeson. They really dove into the lore of the Star Wars to like. And I think because some of these characters have only ever been portrayed in like animation or video games, it was clever to use the voices instead of having the actors on the set.
Yeah.
And you hear James Earl Jones very briefly as Darth Vader again and whatnot. So, which was kind of confusing because it's like, well, if you can hear Anakin's voice, how can you also hear Darth? Like, is there like, are they like 2 separate entities that have like a Sith voice over here and a Jedi voice over here?
There are just so many questions. You know something I just realized while I was thinking about the movie? So when our main characters are on that like desert planet and they go through the like the quicksand basically, and Finn's like, Rey, I have something to tell you. What? But then like they survive. And then Rey's like, you said there's something you wanted to tell me. And then he's like, oh, not now while Poe's here, right? And then later on, even Poe brings it up. He's like, what were you going to say to Rey? And then he's like, oh, no, I'm not gonna say it.
We never found that out.
We never hear what it was. Like, why did you set that up? I mean, I don't know about you, but like for me, I was like, I always thought that Finn kind of had feelings for Rey. Yeah. So I thought it was going to be something like, I love you, Rey. But that doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my goodness!
Like and yeah, that's the tricky thing. I think that's one of the problems with this movie is that there are so many questions about how things work, about like story. Even like another thing, like okay, in storytelling, I feel like when you have a character or something that literally has one role, right, one thing that it has to do, I feel like you have to try and find a really creative way to weave it in the story so that it doesn't seem obvious. Like, why is this person doing this thing? For example, earlier in the first 10 minutes of Rise of Skywalker, you hear like one of the creatures saying, "There's a spy in the First Order," right? Who's the spy? You may wonder. Hey, it turns out it's General Hux. Why is General Hux the spy? And then he's like, "'Cause I hate Kylo Ren," or like, "I want Kylo Ren to lose." It's like, okay, that's fair because we see how in Last Jedi and Force Awakens there were some issues there, but it's almost like they needed that so that our characters who go on to one of the Star Destroyers can get free. General Hux shoots the stormtroopers, and then he's like, yeah, now you can go. And then, like, what price does he have to pay for it? Richard E. Grant takes a gun, shoots him, and then it's like, I found the spy. It's just one of those things that's kind of like set up. You're like, this is kind of interesting. It's like him. It's like, I guess that kind of makes sense, but we're not going to go any further with it. Like, the movie is so jam-packed and has so much to do that, unfortunately, it's like, here's a little story thing. Oh, and we're done. We don't have enough time to focus on it. We have to keep on moving. And it is tough, but yeah, it's like a lot of times you kind of wish that there could be a little bit more.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments where something's established and then 5 minutes goes by. So, like, an example of this, beginning of the movie, you see Rey training, and she comes back from training, hands the lightsaber back to Leia and says, I'm not ready to have your brother's lightsaber. And then, like, 5 minutes later, they figure out what they have to go and do. Then she goes back to say goodbye to Leia, and Leia hands her back the lightsaber, and you're like, and it's like, okay, what was the point of that passing off? And not long after that, we're led to believe Chewbacca's died. I'm like, wow, like, this is great consequences in the Star Wars movie. And then, no, he was on another ship. And then a little later on, we have to erase C-3PO's memories so that he can translate this location for us. Oh, that's really sad, and it's a very powerful moment. And then he sees R2-D2 later, and it's like, backup of my memories. Okay, I guess everything's back to normal here.
Yeah, because it is kind of weird, right? Because, you know, C-3PO is like taking one last look at my friends, and then his memory is wiped so that they can try and figure out where the triangular thing is to find what's the name of the plane again? Do you remember? Like,
no, the Sith planet.
Eccleston or whatnot.
Eccleston.
Eccleston. But anyways, yeah. So where was I going with that? Oh shoot, I forgot. Anyways, point being though, there are like a lot of opportunities where something is set up and then it kind of just.
That's funny. You forgot about 3PO forgetting his memory.
Oh, thank you. That's right. That's what it's C-3PO. So you spend a lot of time.
Like someone erased your memories too, perhaps.
That's right. Taking one last look at my friend Joe before this podcast is over.
Average Joe.
Oh right, yeah. Sorry, man, every time. Sorry, Average Joe. Except for that time. Anyways. Yeah, there's a lot of time before C-3PO gets his memory back, and I was wondering, I was like, man, they're really not like showing the consequences of C-3PO not remembering, and it's because he's going to remember very soon. So it's just one of those things where, like, it doesn't feel... It's hard for all these things to feel cohesive when it's like, here's what we're doing. Just kidding, we're not doing that. Oh, this person died. No, that person didn't die. And they do
Carrie Russell's character, like, I was really interested in her, and I thought it was very noble in how she sacrificed herself. Or, well, she didn't mean to, but basically her planet's blown up, and it's like, oh no, I'm here too, and it's like,
that's right. And she gives the medallion chip to Poe so that they can get on the Star Destroyer. And here's another thing. Even like the Janna character, who's like, we were all stormtroopers, but then we got out. Like, that's a cool idea, but she has one scene, and other than that, she's there to help people out. It's one of those tricky things that, like, I wish we had a few more scenes. I wish we had them doing just a little bit more other than fighting to get a sense of what their character is.
Even Rose, it's like, I feel bad. I'm like she's in way less the movie than she is.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier when I said Last Jedi. She tries to be like an important part of the story, and I mean, she gets a lot of screen time. And then here, it's like, sorry, Rose, we can't find any room for you in the inn that is Rise of Skywalker. It's like, okay.
And even at the end, it seems as though Rey has sacrificed herself to bring balance to the Force.
Yep.
And I was like, they're going an interesting direction.
Yeah, I was like, I almost thought they were gonna keep her dead. I was like, wow.
And keep Kylo Ren here as the last Skywalker.
The Rise of Skywalker, yeah.
And then he brings her back to life with the Force, and then he dies.
Yeah.
Like, they get the nice little moment where they kiss each other, and then he didies.
Yeah.
And it's like,
there you go.
And it's like, okay, but he gets to stay dead.
Yeah, jeez. And here's another thing I want to bring up too. The end, like the third act, especially the space battle with all the different Star Destroyers, and then the big moment where, and you know it's coming, right? Because like they even showed it in the trailer where it's like Lando coming with the Millennium Falcon and like a million ships behind him and whatnot. You have that one shot where it kind of pans up and you see like a million ships. Now, I feel like, it's just like it's hard to be impressed by that thing anymore. And I think it's because I would actually use the example of, in what Star Wars movies have we seen gigantic battles of that size? In probably most of them. But I think of the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. I think of the big sweeping shot where Anakin and Obi-Wan are in like their cool Jedi starfighters, and they're flying around from one ship to the next, and you see like all these big battles and these gigantic carriers and this and that. You get some really wide shots of all sorts of anarchy happening with all these different ships. So it's tough to be impressed by that because, and also there's that weird thing too where it's like, Lando's not there for a while, but then he comes back and he's found everyone, and it's like, so what did he do? It's very much, it doesn't feel earned, right? Avengers Endgame, that's a great example of how you earn the cavalry is coming moment, right? But because I feel like it did it beautifully. And in this movie, it was just like, oh, no one's coming to help us. Just kidding. Here's everyone. Let's go fight. And it just didn't feel earned.
And just to be clear, I think you meant to say cavalry, not Calvary.
Yes, that's what
we don't
I
want. I mean, cavalry came once, and that's fine.
That's right. Yeah, the cavalry.
We want the cavalry.
That's right. Yeah, I always. Yeah.
And there's very, very similar words.
Yeah. Like there's so much to unpack.
Yeah, we're really starting. I feel like we're starting to go down the rabbit hole of all the nitpicks. But I think a lot of what we're saying here are genuine concerns.
Absolutely, yeah. And remember, this is not me saying, oh, I had some problems with this movie and I hate it, right? It's like, I still liked it. I still had a fun time. I was still entertained. And you know what? I by the time the movie ended, I did feel like I was never bored with this. With Last Jedi, I feel like there's a lot you could have cut, because when we got towards the end, I did feel kind of like a little bored, a little like, okay, let's wrap this up. But I did feel like this movie was paced well enough to keep my interest the whole time, even when I was feeling like, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think that's totally earned. That doesn't make sense. But you know what? I was still entertained the whole time.
Yeah, it feels very safe. They were trying to do damage control, and they were trying to, do something that would make everybody happy. And again, in comparison to Endgame, there's not a lot of lasting consequences.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So it's.
But you know what? The one thing I will, and this was something that I find interesting and leaves me with questions, but I still kind of like it, was the way they decided to end the movie, because with the whole like, oh, they've won the battle, they all come and they're all hugging and this and that, and they're all like, the resistance is happy. I was wondering, I'm like, okay, like what scenes do we get afterwards to kind of show maybe like what Poe's gonna do, what Finn's gonna do, and all that. I was gonna say what Kylo Ren's gonna do, but I'm like, no, he's gonna be a Force ghost, we would assume. But then you have like Rey. I kind of like the fact that she has those 2 lightsabers, and she kind of like wraps them up and leaves them in Tatooine in Luke's home, which is kind of cool, because in a way, like, that's a big act of fan service to bring us back to literally
can't leave them on Alderaan.
Yes, no, they cannot, because like it's her kind of coming back to like the beginning of the story to kind of sink it in there, and especially to the moment where like
because episode 1 Tatooine.
That's right. Because the moment too where like the girl's like, "What's your name, Rey?" And it's like, what's your family name or whatnot? And I found it kind of interesting that she says Skywalker instead of Palpatine, which I guess, to be fair, if she said Palpatine, if the girl knew who Palpatine was, she'd be like, you? But I guess she's saying Skywalker because Luke and Leia, in a way, kind of guided her in the last few movies.
That felt so like that. There's an exchange earlier in the movie where a little child asks for her family name.
Yeah.
And then it happens again at the very end of the movie. And I was like, when has this ever happened in a Star Wars movie or in any movie? It's like, oh, what's your last name?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's only because of the whole Rey origin thing that we've been wondering about.
This is kind of forced. And I was also like, yeah, I guess if you're trying to follow the kind of like the standard of what happens in a lot of Star Wars movies, like names matter, family matters, destiny matters.
Yeah.
And again, if you liked that element of The Last Jedi where they kind of went against the everyone has a destiny thing, then you'll be disappointed by that.
Yeah, I just think it was kind of funny because her saying that Skywalker was her last name and not saying, which I mean, to be fair, like I get why they did it, but I feel like her not saying Palpatine was like a big like middle finger to her parents who saved her and who went and kind of sacrificed themselves to try and keep her hidden so that Palpatine wouldn't get her, right? So I feel like I kind of feel bad for her parents because they did that, but I guess at the end of the day, Luke and Leia did kind of guide her. And you know what, that last shot too of her looking at like the twin sons of Tatooine, that was a good shot to end the movie on, because once again, that's one of the things we see probably in the first 20 minutes of A New Hope.
Yeah, and that's how they ended Revenge of the Sith too.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So, like you can't help but feel a little attachment to, like I've said, there are great Star Wars movies, there are good Star Wars movies, there are bad Star Wars movies, but I just love Star Wars so much that I feel like I still felt, it's like, wow, what it's like the end of an era, and I'm gonna miss the Skywalker saga.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the non-spoilers that I liked Kylo Ren's story in the movie. I think we finally got his redemption arc here.
Yeah.
And they copped out by like there's a moment in the movie where you think he's dead, and then it's like, oh no, we're gonna use this force healing power to bring him back to life. And then he has this kind of moment with his dad where he realizes that he doesn't want to fall into the dark side anymore.
Yeah.
Like if you compare his journey from the start, he changes a lot between the start and the end of the movie.
Yep, that's right.
Like he's two different characters because he's Kylo and he turns back to being Ben.
Yeah.
So I like what they did with him. It would have been, I guess, again, like nice to have seen. I guess his story is actually probably the most consistent across the whole trilogy.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Because it was a focus in Force Awakens.
Yeah.
It was a focus in Last Jedi, and it's focused on here as well.
Yes.
Finn and Poe, they're kind of static almost.
Yeah.
They change a little bit, but not that much.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rey changes a bit, but not that much. But Kylo Ren is really the character who has the most ups and downs and tosses and turns.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, like he becomes supreme leader. He replaces Snoke basically, and then he kind of goes back to, I guess, on being on the light side. And you know what? That was a nice thing too. Like it was actually pretty intense for pretty intense for that. Anyways, like I actually, it was kind of a pretty intense moment when Rey stabs Kylo Ren with
his lightsaber.
That's right, his lightsaber, not her lightsaber. And so that was pretty intense. But then the fact too that, like, I kind of suspected that he was going to turn to the light side, but I do like that it happened a bit earlier, right? Whereas Darth Vader, like, it basically happens in the last 20 minutes of Return of the Jedi. I like here that does happen a bit earlier, and I feel like it was expected, but I like that they did it when they did it instead of like dragging it on and having everyone go like, we know what's going to happen. I like, if anything, that around a little after the midpoint, they're like, yep, here's the thing you were expecting. Now you don't have to wonder for another 40 minutes or whatnot. So I thought that was pretty decent.
So coming around to final thoughts, The Rise of Skywalker to me is a very safe movie. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really take a lot of risks. It does all the course corrections that people I guess I would say a large part of the audience would have liked to see after The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. You can see how they were able to salvage what the footage they had of Carrie Fisher for the movie. And there's a couple times where the consequences aren't really there.
Yeah.
And if you sit and think about it too much, the story might start to really become convoluted and hard to understand. Mm-hmm. Having said all that, I really did enjoy the movie.
Yep, I enjoyed it too. I think even though it's jam-packed with so much going on, and like you said, yeah, they try and set up something as if, oh, this definitely is happening, and then it doesn't. They do that too many times. So there are certain things that are only brushed upon ever so briefly, and then they have to move on with the larger story. So I feel like there's so much going on that they can't pay attention to too many things, which like I do kind of wish some things got more attention than they got. And I feel like there are certain things they try and make special, but unfortunately, because it's the 9th Star Wars movie in the Skywalker saga, it's hard for it to feel special. But at the end of the day, despite those problems, I still enjoyed it. I still had a good time with it. There was an occasional laugh to be had here and there, too. I still really like the characters. I think the performances are good. And, I was still... I love Star Wars, no matter good Star Wars or bad Star Wars, despite its flaws. I still really like this movie.
So where does this rank for you in like this new trilogy, the Disney trilogy?
Oh, I would... So, and this might change. This might change because it's so fresh in my memory, but I would probably say I'd probably go Force Awakens as my favorite, obviously. Then possibly this one and then Last Jedi. But this one I don't think is like substantially better than Last Jedi. I think it's just slightly better. And I think I'm judging it on the fact that Last Jedi I felt myself getting kind of bored in the last 15-20 minutes, whereas here I didn't feel myself getting bored at all.
I don't know how I feel. I'm conflicted. Tough, huh? I'm torn. I as of right now, I feel like I enjoyed this one more than Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. And I might be similar to you in thinking I enjoyed The Force Awakens the most. So yeah, it would be Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, and then Last Jedi third. But it's more like Last Jedi is definitely at the bottom. And then with Rise of Skywalker and Force Awakens, it's like, there's fan service elements of Rise of Skywalker that kind of like put it above The Force Awakens for me.
Yeah.
And there will always be a part of me that has a problem with The Force Awakens and how how it dangles the keys in front of you.
Right.
They don't. It's like we don't have to explain this. It'll be in the next movie.
Yeah,
and then knowing that they don't get explained in the next
Yeah.
movie, it's kind of like in hindsight, it's like, well, that ruins or not ruins, but takes away from the Force Awakens for me.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
So having said all of that, I think I got to give Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, I'll give it a good 3.2 out of 4 Bat Cookies.
Ooh. If I were judging this, like let's say I wasn't a fan of Star Wars and I went to go see this movie, I'd probably give it about a 2.8. But I am a fan of Star Wars, so a lot of my grades are bumped up just a little bit because of my love for Star Wars. So I'm going to give it 3 out of 4 Bat Jar Cookies.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what they're called, right?
Yeah. So there you go. If you like Star Wars, you will most likely enjoy Rise of Skywalker. Brings to an end this whole Star Wars saga we've had up until now.
Yep.
It doesn't do it as well as Avengers Endgame did, but
Nope.
That's okay. And if you liked The Last Jedi and how different it was, you will most likely be disappointed by what you see in Rise of Skywalker. Mm-hmm. Now it's time to go into the Bat Jar and look at our mail. So this person signed their email with like a nickname.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume we shouldn't give out the name they sent the email from.
Oh my goodness, this is okay. Here we go.
So start with the subject line.
Yeah, subject line is The Origins of American Ninja Warrior. Hey, NSAJ and mystery host. Just finished listening to the Star Wars Holiday Special episode, which was far more enjoyable than the Star Wars Holiday Special. Not a high bar to reach, I'll admit. When I heard you had no mail, I knew that after years of promising to send mail in, the time was now. Many people today are fans of American Ninja Warrior, but what most people don't know is that the show traces its roots back to a show called Sasuke, produced in Japan. Sasuke initially was something of a hybrid of Wipeout-style slapstick TV and, well, mostly slapstick TV in the early episodes. But as each season progressed from start to finish, it became more of a serious obstacle course competition. From those humble, fringe, and decidedly nerdy beginnings, it's grown to a global phenomenon that, for many, has given them a second family and, for some, a renewed sense of purpose. Anyways, I'm a big fan of your show, and I hope you'll consider making an episode about ANW's origins. ANW, now you're making me hungry. And if you do, I would love to come on the show. Yours in nerdiness, Neo.
Whoa. I know Kung Fu.
Yeah.
I should go on American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, I would excel.
So yeah, I've seen clips of American Ninja Warrior. Mm-hmm. Have you ever watched an episode of the show?
I've seen clips as well, just stuff that's highlighted on YouTube.
Yeah. The star of the show, Arrow, Stephen Amell, he has to stay in shape for the role because it airs on a network that partially markets itself towards teenage girls. So there's a lot of footage of him with his shirt off.
Right.
And on the show, he does the salmon ladder as his character. And so naturally, when he went on an American Ninja Warrior, he was doing the salmon ladder and was like, oh my gosh, he's doing the salmon ladder. And it's like, guys, if you've seen the show, you know he can do the salmon ladder very easily.
Is that the whole thing where like you have the various things that stick out? Yeah, that's right. You have the dowel, but then you have to kind of like jump up and get on the next hook. And then, yeah that's what
because the salmon swims upstream.
That's right. Yeah. That's what I was.
For a topic of conversation for a future episode.
Yep.
If you want to get a hold of the show like Neo did, we can tell you how to do so.
If you want to contact the show with a question or an idea,
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share our posts on Facebook and make sure to like our page because we want everyone to join us inside the Bat.
Well, when you came on the show as a regular host and got your name put in the title sequence, you were imbued with power from the power sword. So it's been an honor. Actually, no, I'll take the power first and then I'll affirm you if that's okay.
Okay. yeah.
So,
do what you will.
So here we go. I got the power sword and...
Yeah!
Let's do the whole
Is
thing.
this going to play the whole song? Let's just see how long this goes on for. Where's it even coming out of? Oh, it could do this.
Yeah.
Okay, the song's almost over.
Just delaying my farewell.
You know what the worst part is? I don't even know what button I pushed to make it happen. So
You have to play around with it after.
I think you guys will be excited to hear from them. You bring a lot of great ideas to the show, and it's been a joy to have you as a regular part of the show these last 6 months. This is not the last time you'll be on the show, but it'll be the last time you're on the show as a permanent part of it for now.
Yeah, and I wanted to say thank you, Average Joe, so much. But no, it's been a blast. It's been so much fun. It's been really cool. I love our conversations that we have. I love when we get along, when we agree on the same thing, and occasionally when we don't. I think it's always been really great. It's been amazing to be involved in this, and it's been such an honor. Thank you to everyone that's listened to me, and this will not be my last episode. I'll definitely come back on other episodes for sure when I'm able to make time, but unfortunately, life sometimes gets in the way and things get too busy, but I will be back again. So it's been a real slice, and I thank you for every minute of it.
To all of our listeners, regardless of whatever holiday you might choose to celebrate this time of the year, I hope you don't take any offense when I wish you a very Merry Christmas.
Yes, me too. Very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
And we're going to take a little bit of a holiday break here for Christmas and New Year's, so we will be back in 2 weeks, which means that our first new episode will come out, I think it's Monday. Oh, let me look at the calendar here so I don't
January
say
6th?
No, so we're taking a whole 2 weeks off.
Oh, okay.
So our first new episode of the year will come out on Monday, January 13th.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully you guys will be able to make it a few weeks without the Batchar.
Yep.
But our first episode of the new year, we're going to be taking a look at all of the nerdy and geeky movies scheduled to come out in 2020. Ooh. So it'll be kind of like a preview of what is to come on the show for later in the year.
Cool.
And it'll be the way to introduce new hosts. So
nice.
Until the year 2020, until the next decade, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Ben the Movie Buff.
Catch you on the flip side.
See ya next time I'm on the show.